Welcome again, everybody. Yali Madat, welcome to our WAP's Maternal Mental Health Awareness webinar. Thank you for being here today to participate. This is actually a logical follow-up to our Preparing for Parenthood webinar, for which we've been running a series of workshops over the last 12 months. And as a mother of three, I fully empathize with the need to acknowledge maternal mental health. I know that I suffered postnatal depression after I had my first son. Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't have access or wasn't aware of any access to an information stream such as this. And today, I can accept that 23 years ago, when my son was born, these issues were considered taboo and they were brushed under the carpet, especially within certain cultures. So the 4th of May, 2020 sees the 6th Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week worldwide. It's a week-long campaign dedicated to talking about mental illness during and after pregnancy, advocating for women and their families affected by it, and helping the women and their families access the information, care and support they need to recover. Things this year have clearly been a little different because of coronavirus. The theme this year is supporting mums during difficult times. So this theme is enabling communities, professionals, and organizations to provide a supportive platform to reassure families and to signpost them to vital resources on offer to safe support, something that is needed now more than ever. Having children and being a parent is both exhilarating and daunting. Moreover, in these unprecedented times, there will be even more questions and concerns and mixed feelings of excitement, anticipation, isolation, and even despair. So we know today our fantastic presenters will offer you vital information and support you with as much as they can by sharing their knowledge and their personal experiences. During this time of lockdown, we are delighted that so many of you can connect with us online, giving us greater exposure to support our Jamaat, your families and friends. So on the next slide, please. On the slide today, the next slide, you will have already received pre-event information through an email with our speakers' bios. So without further delay, this moves me swiftly on to present WAP's National Council member, Shalina Huda, to say a few words. Shalina, over to you.
Thank you, Shayla. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And on behalf of WAP and Health Board, I'd like to say thank you to all of our speakers who are joining us to be able to bring this topic to you. WAP's mission is to uplift, empower and support women throughout their journey in life. We also want to enable opportunities for other women to support each other and to uplift them and empower them as well. So this is one of our topics that we want to present to you in which we are doing this, and hopefully you will feel a sense of comfort and support throughout all of our sessions that we provide you. I'll now hand back over to the team.
Thank you so much, Shalina. So on the screen now, you'll see what we will cover today, today's agenda. We've got a lot of information to impart in a short space of time. So again, without further ado, we'd like to introduce you to our first speaker, Dr. Shamina Sayana, who will be talking about maternal mental health and the family. Over to you, Dr. Shamina.
Hello, thank you very much for letting me join this really valuable event. So just to give you a tiny bit of background about me, I am going to be talking today a little bit about perinatal mental health, but for you to understand that though I'm a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. I've actually approached this, I guess, from the child and the family's point of view. I'm a developmental paediatrician. And so hopefully some of the things that we discuss today will be helpful in kind of understanding the concept. And I suppose that's why I've been given the first bit. So let's talk a little bit about perinatal mental health. Perinatal sounds like a bit of a scary term, doesn't it? But essentially what it means is around pregnancy and birth. That's what perinatal mental health means. And interestingly, you'll see that we haven't said postnatal depression, we've said perinatal mental health. And the reason why we've done that is because actually the problems that happen around birth can be varied in terms of their symptoms, and depression wouldn't cover it. So that's why we tend to use this more all-encompassing term. I think a big thing for all of us to remember actually is how impactful perinatal mental health is in general in the population. So 1 in 5 women will have mental health problems during their pregnancy or after the birth. And that can range in severity, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The thing that I think is quite interesting is if you look at the sort of strict definitions of perinatal mental health, they say that it tends to happen in the pregnancy and up to a year after birth. But what I know from many experiences of many women and families is that sometimes it can last much longer. And some of that is probably to do with the fact that pregnancy itself triggers and becomes the start event, if anything, for some mental health issues in general, because pregnancy is a big life event. So I wouldn't stick to that strict definition of up to a year, but that's the kind of general thing that we're told. So if we go on, thank you. So this is a little bit about what I was saying about the range of type of symptoms that we can have. And you can see in this slide that we're actually looking at almost an increased frequency of the milder symptoms. And as you get more significant symptoms, there is a decreased frequency, okay? So what we know in general is that pregnancy is a big deal and having a baby is a big deal. And actually that can just impact on you emotionally anyway, okay? And that's sort of part of normal, though I don't like using that term because I think all of this is sort of a spectrum of normal. But then the sort of next step in that spectrum is what we call the adjustment disorder and distress. So this is, you've just had a baby, it's exhausting, it's not what you expected, it's spun your whole life around, and it's causing you to be quite distressed about coping with this whole new, you know, when I think of birth, I always think it's like a tornado that's come into your life. So coping with this tornado is quite challenging. But the difference with adjustment disorders is that usually the women who have this can, what we call, function. Okay, so that means they can still just about do the, you know, the washing and the bathing and the getting out of bed and the managing to look after baby. Okay, if we go to the next level of kind of intensity, we talk about mild to moderate depressive illness and anxiety states. Often those two symptoms tend to go together, depression and anxiety. So this is when you start to have fearful thoughts and worries and concerns, and they start to repeat quite a lot. You're having them a lot. Sometimes mothers talk about obsessive thoughts. They just keep coming back. So that in itself can be quite distressing. But again, there are lots of different levels of how difficult that can be to impact on your life. The next thing we talk about is post-traumatic stress disorder. And one of the things we know is that women who have traumatic births often are predisposed to significant mental health issues because of the trauma of the birth itself. So that's almost a category in its own. And then as we get to the more significant end, we're talking about severe depressive illness. So where you really can't function, yeah? Where you are at risk of being a harm to yourself or others. This is when we start to think about these things. And then there are also other significant mental health disorders, which probably people are more predisposed to genetically, like schizophrenia or bipolar. And those kind of disorders sometimes present in this massive event that we call pregnancy. So sometimes we will see that. And that is basically the perinatal mental health issue is a presentation of a chronic serious mental illness. And then the smallest proportion is something we call postpartum psychosis, where the mental health issue and the way that your brain is functioning is so challenging that you sort of depart from reality a bit and you start to have hallucinations and paranoia, and it's actually very disturbing for a mother. Okay, but this is a spectrum, as I said, and different people will find themselves in different parts of the spectrum. Shall we move on to the next slide, and then we can talk a little bit about some of the signs and symptoms, some of which I've discussed. So being tearful, something as really as simple as that, can be a sign that you're getting quite depressed and getting quite low, particularly if the tearfulness is persistent. It's happening every night, every day. That's quite an indicator. Obviously, everyone's allowed to have an burst because the baby won't stop crying, okay? But it's when it's persistent and it's stopping you from functioning that we start to worry. Another big one for me is being unable to bond with baby. Yeah, I always say to parents that actually you need to be in a space where you feel calm and safe to be able to offer that love. And if you're in a distressed state, it's really hard to make that bond. It's actually not your fault. It's very hard to do it because we need to be in a calm state to do that. So sometimes not being able to bond with the baby is the indicator that there's something more significant going on. This one almost makes me laugh, disturbed sleep patterns. We all have disturbed sleep patterns when you've just had a baby. But I think this is about the fact that you can't even get to sleep when you're given the opportunity to sleep. It's that kind of thing where actually it's become really persistent and exhausting for you. Another one that I think is quite powerful is being stuck in your own mind, which is a very clear one, which is just all the thoughts keep going round and round and you can't see anything else. And you also can't see any pleasure in the world. You've lost the joy, as it were, of the things that you enjoyed. So these are some of the indicators that there might be something more significant going on. Can we go to the next slide? So the one thing that I think I want to point out here is that actually the causes of postnatal depression are, and the causes of perinatal mental health issues are multiple, okay? And you can see that here. So as I said before, you might be biologically predisposed to a mental health issue, either genetically or because maybe you already have some low self-esteem, and then this not being able to cope makes you actually feel worse about yourself, and that perpetuates, okay? You might be predisposed because pregnancy reminds us of the relationship we had with our parents and that time in our early childhood and the relationships we had then. And sometimes the impact of things that have happened earlier in our life come back at these kind of stressful times. The other thing is it's just a big change in lifestyle, isn't it? And so if you were used to being able to control and schedule your life and then this tornado comes in, that can make it quite difficult. The other thing is if your home environment at the moment that you are pregnant or having a baby is stressful, if there is somebody constantly criticizing you, if you don't get enough help at home, then sometimes that can really make the symptoms much, much worse. So it's a real call to the people around you that if you are suffering, they're there supporting in the background, because that can make a huge difference. The big thing I want you to get from this whole slide is none of this is a woman's fault. Okay, these are things actually that you can't do anything about. There's something that have just predisposed a woman to being in this place. And there's no such thing as this is all in your head, get over it, because that's absolutely untrue. These are biological processes. And maybe if we go to the next slide, I can tell you that actually, and I'm just keeping an eye on my time, there are changes that are happening in the brain itself when a woman is going through perinatal mental health issues. And if we do sort of MRI scanning, functional MRI scanning, where we look at which bits of the brain are active, we see that the brain can become very depressed, become more active in areas that are associated with fear and anxiety. Often postnatal depression, for example, looks very much like major depressive disorder when you look at it on a brain MRI scan. And that also translates to the chemical changes that are happening in your brain. So the transmitters that transmit messages from the nerves may be depressed in depression, for example. And that's how some of the medications work when women are started on medications. A big thing when I talk about the brain, and I suppose it's my last point, is also to remember that the brain that's being affected is not just the mothers, but also the babies. And that if a mother and a baby can't connect, then one of the challenges is how does that baby develop? Because development is to do with the signs and signals that a baby gets from their carers. So they need to be able to see those facial expressions and those reciprocal sounds that are made and have those cuddles. And a baby can sense when you're anxious. Even if you put your baby against your skin and your heart rate is raised, they will feel that, okay? So the big message, I suppose, is if a woman is finding it difficult to connect with her baby, the baby just needs one carer that can do the connection. And that's when it's really important that the people around the mum are supporting in giving that stimulation, when mum might not be in the right space at that time to give that stimulation. That's not to say that all women who have perinatal mental health issues don't connect with their babies. Some do. But the point is that if she's finding it difficult, then it's really important that everyone else around them support to Farah's bit about this in terms of seeking help.
Thank you, Shamina. Yalimudat, everyone. I'll be talking about the referral pathways. As Shamina talked about signs and symptoms, and some of them are normal for every individual to experience. But if they are persistent and impacting on your everyday life, then you should then the way to seek help is to go speak with your GP, your health visitors, midwives, nurse, school teacher. The reason I put school teacher is if you've got older children in school and if you feel comfortable having a conversation to a teacher or a member of the staff as they are aware of the referral process, then you should do so. The last is self-referral. Every local authorities have contact details that if you need to make a self-referral, the list is available on their website, which you can get the information out and make a self-referral for the support. In the next slide. So how the referrals work, so all referrals are sent to either adult social services or children's services to be analysed, the need and support which is required by the family, children and individual. Now children's services are responsible for supporting children who have special needs, for protection, where support is needed for family to decrease the risk and make the child life experience good. Adult social care is the support which is provided to adults with physical or learning disabilities and physical or mental illnesses. So how does the referral process work? So when the referrals are received, they all get screened by a team called MASH team. MASH stands for Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, where the team of senior practitioners and social workers sits. All the referrals which have come through a phone contact are made to the parents to identify the needs and to explore what support is needed for the family. With the family's consent and after looking at the risk and needs, families are offered support through either early help worker or a support of a social worker, or they are giving information about the local offer, which is the signposted to the local offer which is present and the information is given. An example of during this time of COVID time, a few weeks ago, I received a self-referral from a mother which who had 5 weeks old baby and had a 3-year-old as well at home, and she was presenting with the signs which Shamina talked about. She was very tearful, very emotional over the phone, and she said that she's coming to the point where she feels she had enough. She's unable to cope. She's unable to make any bond with the new baby. And also she's struggling to manage with the 3-year-old. So after having the discussion and speaking about the other risk and what other needs, there was also identification that there's financial problems as well, because of partner is a self-employed due to COVID. The income is not coming in and they're using the saving at the moment, and that's impacting on her mental well-being and making it her symptoms more worse. So obviously with her consent, a social worker support was offered, where a home visit was carried out, and we made sure that money has started going in on a weekly basis to make sure that their basic needs are met in terms of food, baby milk, and for the 3-year-old as well. The early help support worker was also involved at the same time to give regular phone call to mom, to speak with her, to build that rapport, to reassure her, and to help her with any strategies and support needed for the challenging behavior for 3-year-old, and making that connection with the newborn baby, offering her baby massage or the other supports which is offered. If where families do not wish to engage with long-term support, then information about universal services and support which is available in the community are given with the contact details. At no point the referrals will progress without a consent. The only time we overlook consent when we are worried that there is a significant risk or harm to either to the mother or to the baby or to one of the parents or any family member. So anytime, what also happens is, I also talked about adult social services. So during the assessment, whenever we feel that there is an adult who is unable to function due to mental health, affected mental health, then at that point, the referral to adult social services are made. Or if there's any disabilities which is then impacting on the care of the baby, then adult social services are then involved and referrals are being made through children's services, and both services work together to making sure that baby and the parents and all the rest of the children are safe. In the end, just some tips for the family members to look for. This is from a mental first aid course, which some tips are that approach the person, the family members, and assist where you can, listen and communicate non-judgmentally, give support, and encourage the person to seek appropriate professional help, because as you said, during this time, some of the individual her self-esteem and self-confidence are not very good, and sometimes a little encouragement from the family member really help. So when they are making that phone call, if somebody is sitting with them to help them, so they're able to discuss and seek the further support. I will pass it back to Shamina for further discussion.
Lovely, thank you, Farah. So now actually we have the pleasure of listening to Tasneem's story around her own experiences, and I think this is probably the most powerful bit in a way. So I think we'll get going really. Tasneem, tell us a little bit about yourself first, so we know who you are and a little bit about your children. That would be nice.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all for having me and for joining us today to hear my story. My name is Tasneem. I have 2 children. I have a daughter who is almost 9. She's actually 9 on the 22nd of May, but she's a 9-year-old going on 14 teenager. And I have a son who is 3. He turned 3 in February. I'm a single mum, so I'm currently on my own with both children. Which obviously has been challenging with school and nursery both being closed full time. So yes, we are just getting through every day as best as we can, I suppose.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And I'm just going to say, Tasneem, if the children appear, that's absolutely fine. We know that they may need to come in, so we'll see how we go as we get along. So I guess going into your story a little bit, Tasneem, from what I understood, you experienced your sort of significant bout of perinatal mental health issues in your second pregnancy with your son. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes. So what happened was I had my daughter and basically loved being a mum. And I took to the role really well, and I couldn't wait to have another child and for her to have a sibling and sort of experience it all again. We have quite a large age gap, as we had some trouble getting pregnant, and we had a miscarriage along the way. When I finally did get pregnant with my son, obviously I was overjoyed and extremely happy and excited to be welcoming another child into our family. But when I was about 4 months pregnant, I started to get really bad anxiety, and it was around the fact that, oh my goodness, how am I going to cope with another baby? How am I going to do the, sleepless nights and also look after my daughter and do the school runs? How's it going to affect my relationship with my daughter, with my then husband, and how am I just going to get through it? And I started to feel a little bit worried about my ability to cope, and I felt like I wouldn't be a good mother to him, and I probably won't be a good mother to her. I went through some really difficult feelings, almost feelings of, actually, do you know what? I don't want to actually have a baby anymore. I've actually changed my mind. After years and years and years of trying, I actually think I made a mistake. And it got to the point where I just thought I was trapped. And I was trapped because I was having this baby that I didn't feel I was going to be able to look after. And I really didn't know what to do. And that anxiety became depression, because I was in a situation and I didn't know how to get out of it. Anyway, obviously went through the pregnancy, which was really tough. The depression symptoms and signs were, I didn't sleep all night, I slept all day. I didn't really eat very well, because I just wasn't hungry. I had a total loss of appetite, but I obviously knew that the baby needed nutrition, so I tried to eat what I could. I didn't want to leave the house. I had really bad anxiety about leaving my house. I didn't want to see anyone or talk to anyone because they would be talking about the baby. Obviously, I was quite heavily pregnant, and you know, as you do, people are going to ask, oh, when are you due, and all that kind of thing. And I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to pretend that actually it wasn't there. And I referred to it as an it, not even a he or my son. It was, I felt like I was carrying a little alien in my belly. It was very, very difficult feelings. And, you know, I kind of didn't really understand it, to be honest. It was a very confusing time. And I think I had a real contradiction in my mind because I'd had a miscarriage. Part of me was scared to have that again, but the other part of me was actually scared to have the baby be here and be healthy, because I didn't think I was going to be able to cope with losing another child. But at the same time, I was worried about being able to cope with another child. So it was so many difficult thoughts and feelings and emotions. And to be honest, I just didn't know how to handle it.
I was just going to ask, how was it when he was born? Actually, how did that feel?
So I thought to myself, and people had told me, when he's born, you'll feel better because he'll be there, you'll see him. And I didn't actually. I actually felt worse. I actually cried when he was born, not because I was happy, but because I was really upset, because now he was here and I actually had to deal with him. I didn't want to touch him. I didn't want to feed him. I didn't want to look at him. It was total rejection. And I remember being told that I needed to carry him down to the ward from the birthing unit, and I didn't want to touch him. And I said, no, can someone else carry him? And they said, no, you need to do it. It was very difficult. I did manage to breastfeed him for a week, and then I couldn't do it anymore. But I just felt no bond, and I actually, I didn't feel any love. To be honest, I think I was at a stage where I just had no emotions whatsoever. I was just numb. After 5 months of feeling anxious and depressed, my emotions were switched off totally. And I just didn't want him. I wanted to pretend this was all a bad dream and I'll wake up and it'll all go away. But of course that's not the case. So
very tough, very, very tough feelings, really. I mean, it's quite hard to even understand what you went through, Tasneem, and I think it's really brave of you to share kind of some very, what I call unspeakable thoughts, but really important ones to speak about. And I wonder, just as we're moving, you can tell us, I know that you engaged with mental health services, but maybe if you can tell us a little bit about what you did yourself that started to pull you out of this really dark space, because I know that you had some strategies that really helped you, in addition to the treatment you were receiving.
Yeah, so as well as seeing a psychiatrist, being prescribed medication and having therapy, group therapy and individual therapy, there are lots of other things that you can do to lift your mood. I'd been isolated for quite a while. I hadn't gone out, I hadn't engaged with the outside world. I basically lost contact with a lot of people. And I tried lots of different things, and I found that not everything worked for me. So the things I tried just briefly are like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, Pilates, and I didn't really feel that was working for me at all. I decided to start swimming. as it's something I enjoyed as a child, and I absolutely loved it. I found a gym that had a creche, and I put my son in the creche for an hour, and I went for a swim. And as I was swimming, I would just count the number of strokes I would do from one side to the other, and I literally got into my own little zone. And it was lovely to have that sort of time to myself a couple of times a week. I also started journaling, and actually this is the thing that really pulled me out of it. I started to write down things about my whole life, and sort of things that happened in my childhood. And I think I felt very guilty for feeling depressed about having my baby. I felt shame. I felt guilty that I couldn't love him. I couldn't connect with him. I couldn't bond with him. I felt guilty that I wasn't able to give my daughter the attention she wanted. But actually, I kind of discovered that actually, I mean, I blamed myself for my illness. In my mind, I thought to myself, well, if I didn't have him, then I wouldn't be having this. So it's all my fault. This is all my fault. I'm a burden on my family. I'm not able to function. So it got to a point where I just thought, well, actually, do you know what? Maybe I just shouldn't be here anymore. But journaling really, really helped me in a very private space express those feelings without any judgment. And I could just literally write and write and write and write. And as I was writing, I had tears streaming down my face, because, the things I was writing were actually very, made me very emotional. And to date, no one has seen that journal. That is for me, and it probably will always be for me. But
Absolutely.
when I realised that actually this isn't my fault, I got ill, I didn't do anything to make myself ill. I started to get better, because for months and months and months, I blamed myself for all of this. And I carried around this huge weight on my shoulders, thinking it's my fault, I've messed everything up. And actually, when I realized that actually, no, it's not my fault, this has happened, there are reasons that this has happened, there are other reasons, not just the pregnancy, not just the birth, not just, having the baby, there are other reasons that were probably, brewing in the background. And when it was like a revelation, when I found out why this happened to me and what, that other things were connected, I began to heal and recover. And I also found a lot of peace through spirituality, and that's reading scriptures. And it's not only Islamic scriptures, it's scriptures from other religions as well. I do have a very strong faith, and I found, the sort of trying to connect with God and reading things about children are a blessing really, really helped me to just, I guess, maybe calm myself down and try and realize that, actually I've got 2 healthy children, and, things will get better. And a lot of people did say to me, when he gets a bit older, it'll be easier because your children will interact and play. And actually, I didn't believe them at that time. But it has got better. And I guess also...
And that's good. That's good. And that's positive to hear, actually. Just reflecting on what you've said, Tasneem, I think the powerful things I'm getting from that is that everybody will have something that suits them better. So it's really interesting how you said, mindfulness, yoga wasn't for you. And actually there's some good evidence to show that, particularly if there's been previous trauma, if you try and engage with something like mindfulness, it isn't going to work. Yeah. And so it's kind of different strokes for different folks. What's interesting is that sometimes some therapeutic things like swimming, which are very much about the physicalness of our body and the rhythm of breathing and all of those kind of things, can be quite powerful. But it sounds like you went on a journey yourself to find out what thing worked for you. And I think the last thing that I picked up was that this thing about taking gratitude in the things that you are happy about and that you do feel grateful for can be another useful technique. But obviously, as we've said, it is kind of different strokes for different folks. And I think people almost have to go on their own journey. Some people won't be as spiritual, but some people might find the yoga useful for them. So it's finding what works best, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think another thing just quickly that helped me was music and just listening to music, because when you're singing, you're focusing on the music and the lyrics. You know, for me, it calmed my mind down because it stopped me thinking about all these crazy thoughts that I had in my mind. And I would just listen to music in the morning. I'd listen to music in the car when I was just at home, and it really, really helped me as well. So yeah, that's another thing that
so you had sort of multiple tools in your box, is what I call it, really, that you could use when you knew that you were sort of dropping, and you needed that boost. I suppose as we're coming to closing your story, Tasneem, and I would love to hear more from you, but I know we've got limited time today. I think the bit that probably is worth addressing is some of the stigma around being diagnosed with perinatal mental health issues. And I know you did have some involvement with social services, didn't you? And it would be good to know how that impacted on you, and generally how, you know, how it felt, the stigma of it, really.
Yes, I mean, mental health is something that has a huge stigma attached to it, and I actually felt really ashamed that it happened to me, and I didn't want to tell anyone for a very long time, and I didn't want to access help, for the simple reason that I thought if social services get involved, they're going to take away my children. So I wanted to avoid them at all costs. However, a referral was made, and I know we're short on time, but to just briefly say, social services actually did really help us. They obviously did their assessments and contacted my daughter's school and GP and all of that thing, which all obviously came up, you know, there was no concerns. And I think the main thing is that they made sure that I was supported and that my daughter was supported in the transition of going from an only child to, you know, having a sibling. We were just referred to the local children's centre. And they basically took over and just encouraged me to come out, meet other mums, come to some of the classes, make sure I get the baby weighed. And it was more of a friendly chat, and it was more of an informal discussion to find out what I needed. It wasn't to place my child with another family or that I was a bad mother. It was just that I was going through some emotions and I was struggling. And they kind of helped me see that actually it's okay to seek help, and it's okay to say, okay, I am struggling, I need help, and there's nothing wrong in doing that. And I think as a mother, I personally put a lot of pressure on myself to be the perfect mother because I was a stay-at-home mother and I wasn't working. So all I really had was being a mother. And the thought for me, you know, the thought that I can't be a good mother anymore was just really, really very upsetting for me. But actually social services were great. They were really helpful, really, really lovely. And you know, I actually had nothing to be scared of. I was absolutely petrified to have them involved, have them come, but actually, you know, it really helped us.
So, I mean, I think that's the powerful bit at the end, actually, Tasneem, listening to your story, that you sought help and it was worth doing it, and that actually it wasn't what you expected it to be, and all those fears that came out of it. And, you know, to sort of close our discussion really is to say, Tasneem, thank you so much for being so honest, and sharing something that's quite intimate, really. We're very lucky to be able to hear your story, but I think the powerful takeaway from that is that actually seek help, find ways in which you can empower yourself to get through this really tough time, which is not anybody's fault. It's just kind of the nature of how we've been built and made. And once we realize that and remove the guilt and the shame, that's probably where the path to recovery comes. It sounds like that from your story.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for letting me share my story today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure for us.
Thank you so much, both of you. Shamina, Dr. Shamina, thank you, Tasneem. As Dr. Shamina has said, you've shared so very openly and honestly and profoundly and powerfully with us today. In fact, thank you to all the speakers today who have really offered us vital information. And I know that for those of you online today, you will have some questions undoubtedly to ask our speakers. So please remember to ask them through the Zoom chat. The first one, please, is how does a family member or partner help someone who is in denial that they may have some sort of perinatal mental health problems? Dr. Shamina, perhaps that one for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably I can answer a bit, and maybe even Tasneem can. I think the first thing is to do it in the non-judgmental way. I think that's the biggest one. And I know Farah has talked about that as well in terms of the approach. That if you do it with kindness, and if we talk about the fact that actually this happens to a significant number of women, and that this isn't your fault, and that this is actually something that we just need to manage, and we're going to support you and we're going to help you, I think that's the first way to opening the door, is actually a very non-judgmental space, and also giving people choices. because I think one of the challenges is probably what Tasneem talked about, which is the fear that as soon as I say I have a perinatal mental health issue, someone's going to take my baby away, I'm not a good enough mum. And I think if people can understand that there are options, like what is it that we can do to support you? And it could be something really small, like maybe let's start by giving you some time away from the baby. You know, I'm remembering Tasneem's story about her time when the baby was in the creche and how powerful that was for her. So maybe offering something with it so it doesn't feel judgmental, but it feels supportive. I think that would be the first thing. I don't know if Farah or Tasneem had a comment on that.
Well, I would just say to it, yes, be non-judgmental, and as you said, the fear is attached with it, and it's sometimes as a family member, you can approach a professional just to seek help and then support support the other person till they gain the confidence, and when they are ready, then you can have like a long-term support for the individual as well.
Dr. Shamina, there is another question that has come through. It's very similar, but there is a slight different angle. So what should family members look for in the case of a mother in denial? And can you experience perinatal issues a long time after giving birth? And that's directed specifically at Dr. Shamina.
So the answer is definitely, if I do the second part first, definitely you can. Tasneem and I were talking about this actually earlier, that as I said, because mental health problems in general might be triggered by the storm that is pregnancy and birth, you may find that there's persistence of these issues post-birth 2-3 years longer after the birth. So definitely it can happen. As to a mother who's in denial, I think it might be useful for Tasneem maybe to talk about this from her own perspective, as to how you would have liked to be approached and how you were approached and what worked.
Yes, I mean, I was actually in denial to start off with. I just thought, oh, you know, it's fine. It's just a normal part of anxiety around mainly maybe having a second child, and feelings of how am I going to cope, and I can't do this, and I don't want to do this. But actually, I think that what I did was I actually went to see a counsellor during my pregnancy when I started to have this anxiety and fear, and I did weekly sessions with her, and I felt that it was really helpful because it was a space where you know, I could just let it all out, and she wouldn't tell me off, and she wouldn't tell me that I shouldn't be feeling like this, and you know, she would just listen and reassure and give me tips on how to get through the next week. And it was basically on a weekly basis. And actually, you know, once the baby was born, and I thought I would feel better and I didn't, that's when I accepted that actually, yes, I'm actually very ill right now.
So what I'm hearing from that is the non-judgmental element, isn't it? And that's why sometimes it's hard for family members to be the ones who point it out in a way, because especially if it's your mother/mother-in-law, you're like, well, you're judging me because you think you're a better mother. Or if it's your partner, it's, well, you know, it can be feeling I'm incapable and you're telling me I'm incapable. So sometimes it's about even offering the space. So saying to them, look, you may not want to talk to me about this, but maybe we can seek help so there's someone else you can talk to about it that isn't me. And that's okay too.
I think we have to be careful not to belittle the feelings of the person going through it, because I had so many things to say. Well, your baby's healthy, you know, you don't have to go to work, it's only your second child, some people have 3 or 4, you know, what have you got to be depressed about, what are you worried about, you've got so much help. And it was like, you know, I felt like my feelings were invalid and my worries and anxiety was invalid, and that made me really upset and angry, to be honest with you, because I was feeling what I was feeling. And
absolutely. So validating would be a really important thing, is to say that I hear you, and what we sometimes say in mental health, Farah, you'll recognise this, I witness you. I realise that you're going through this, and I am witnessing that, I'm not denying it. So maybe that's quite important as a family member.
I have 2 kids who are now at school, and only now am I starting to think about my connection with my kids when they were born. I can relate a lot to the lack of bonding and resentment of them changing my life. How do I stop this recurring during lockdown? Very timely question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing about this is, as I said, sometimes it's when we've left the burning building that we look back and reflect. So sometimes you will find, particularly situations like this where we've got time to reflect, is the time when the feelings come back. A big concept that I've understood in mental health sort of thinking and therapeutic thinking is not to be angry with the feelings, but to let them come. And just sort of what I liked, Tasneem talked about, is in her journaling, she had a space to talk about those unspeakable feelings, right? So it's okay to have those feelings, but the question is, are they impacting you so much that maybe you need some techniques to manage them? And it might be something as simple as journaling. If you're reflecting back now during the corona time, then this might be the time to think about those connections that you had with your child in those early years. But I would say probably with the essence of a little bit of the gratitude thinking, to say, well, actually, my kids are okay. Don't do the blame thing, which is what can happen. It's to say, well, actually, the kids are okay. They're thriving. You know, we didn't have the connection then, but I'm recognizing that now, and I'm healing myself now, because I think that's the biggest part, is healing ourselves, isn't it? And so it's to kind of remove the guilt and remove the shame, because there isn't any guilt and shame, and to start maybe thinking about some of these techniques. Obviously, if those thoughts are persisting and you're feeling really low, that's the time to seek mental health support. And it doesn't need to be perinatal mental health support. You can seek support from your GP at any time. I think that's something people don't realise about the COVID crisis. That doesn't mean you can't access your GPs and there aren't virtual consultations. There are. So it's a sort of staged approach. Do some things that make you feel good about your own mental health. Don't allow the guilt and the shame to come in, because there is nothing to be ashamed of. And maybe use the space and time to reflect, because actually it can be really powerful, as Tasneem said. Farah, did you have anything to add to
Also,
that?
as I said, all the children's services are working functionally during the COVID time. So if you give a call to your local children's centre and speak to a worker, they'll be quite happily give you tips every day to cope with those feelings, and the little strategies and techniques they'll go through you every day. So it's just sometimes just a phone call or just the reassurance of how you're doing. It just gives you that positive empowerment, and how you and your children are doing with the bonding and relationship. All the services which is available locally are free of charge, and that's what we don't sometimes realize. There's so much out available. It's just assessing, exploring it within the community and using the services.
I think there are also things that you can do. So, for example, I've looked at things that, for example, we print out a scavenger hunt sheet, and we go out in the garden and we go and look for what we can find. And that's a nice little activity that we can do that's 10-15 minutes. Even reading is really good for bonding. So my son will crawl into my lap and we'll read a few books together, and my daughter will sit and read with us as well. And that's quite a nice thing to do. The other thing I try and do is, we don't have a strict timetable, but I do have a half an hour slot during the day where mummy wants to sit down and have a cup of coffee, and they can go on their screens for half an hour, and I just get a bit of peace. Because when you're with the child, from 6 a.m. till maybe 8 p.m, it really does wear you down. And I think, don't feel guilty for actually taking that time out for yourself, especially now, because, you don't have any time to yourself. And it's just constant mummy, 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 mummy. And it actually, it can be very, very difficult. So I think maybe just trying to figure out the things that your children would like and things that they'll enjoy doing, and maybe trying to do that together, which may help the bonding a little bit as well.
The question about how do we self-reflect, and just to quickly answer that, so in your local borough, if you Google on www.gov.uk, whatever borough you live in, and there are contact details for children's centres, and the contact details of MASH team, children's services team, and out of duty hours team contact details are available. All you have to do is just call them and speak with them and, you know, explain whatever situation is, and from there they'll take it away. So it's just a phone call, and that's how you do a self-referral at this time COVID. If it's open, then you can go walk into Children's Centre and speak with them, but during this time just make a phone call and they'll speak with you in details.
Thank you very much. There is another question that's come through. What advice would you give to someone who is suffering from it through this COVID time? We are unable to go out and meet friends and family, so it can be very lonely and hard to get yourself out of it. But obviously that's already, I think, been covered. But if anybody has anything else to add to that.
So the big thing that I would say is it's about working as a team. Yeah. So whoever is in your space, it's about saying, okay, if you're feeling low, I'm here, I'm part of your team. So when you need me, let's do it. You know, whether that be, I'll give a feed to the baby, I'll do the wake up at night, you know, I'll give you half an hour in the garden without the kids jumping on top of you. I think that's quite important, but also using your virtual network, and remembering that there are people, you know, in the sort of further family afield who you can contact and talk to and speak with and have some non-judgmental time with as well. I know that we're going to put up a slide about the institutional support that is also available through the community, and we do have our coronavirus support helpline. So there are kind of more formal ways that you could connect, but I think even just making connections virtually, working as a team together, realizing and acknowledging how hard this is, and not giving yourself big targets to get to. I must do X, Y, and Z. Just being proud of yourself that you got up in the morning and had a shower. That's brilliant. Well done. Because actually that's all that's needed. As this wonderful phrase that Donald Winnicott uses, and I repeat continuously, you just need to be a good enough parent, nothing more than that at all. So it's a tough time, and that's okay. Maybe that's the big message from it.
Now, if listening to this talk, we realize we did suffer mental health, perinatal mental health issues, but the children are now older. How can we get help?
So it's a bit similar to the previous one, yeah. I suppose. I think it's probably through your general practitioner. You know, I say that actually, but there's lots of different things that Tasneem and I talked about that can sometimes help with your mental health. So it might be that you seek out a talking therapy, which you can do privately or through the NHS, through your GP. It may be that you seek out some of the alternative therapies that we've mentioned, and you might want to try things like yoga, meditation, if it works for you, exercise, those kind of things, journaling. Because actually what we're talking about in terms of the management of postnatal and perinatal issues is that the management remains similar to what we would use in general mental health issues. So GP is a good option, or sometimes private therapeutic input if you don't want to go that route, or even some of the alternative, I don't like to call them alternative, what I mean is kind of the additional therapies that you can seek out. Connection, Tasneem, maybe this is the one where you can add in a little bit about some of the things that you do that really help you, that might help others.
Yeah, so even, I know obviously now it's very difficult, but you know, I would sort of just go for a walk, which I found was quite nice. I actually had some acupuncture. Again, I know we can't do that right now, but the acupuncture really helped me. It helped me with my sleep. It helped me with controlling my appetite. It basically just made, I felt like I was walking on air after each session. It really uplifted my mood, which was great. But like I said, music, I mean, at the moment, you know, listening to a few songs, and even songs that your children like, and having a bit of a sing song together, which can be really fun, and they could really love that. And I just think that even now, for me, my self-care kind of went out the window when I was feeling really low. And like Shamina said, you know, I didn't want to shower for days. I didn't want to put makeup on. I didn't want to get dressed. I couldn't really even get out of bed on some days. But I find that, you know, if I actually make an effort to actually do all those things, even though I'm not going anywhere, I actually feel better, and that means I have a better day. And yes, I know it is difficult to do that when you've got children running around, and you know, you will have an audience in the bathroom, but you know, that's part of being a mother. So what do you do? But you know, it's really important. Self-care is really important, and I think as a mother we really we let that go because you just don't have the time, and you know doing your nails is not your priority, but actually it can actually really lift your mood. And another thing me and my children do actually is we take lots of silly Snapchat pictures because they love it, and it's just a really fun remembrance for us during this time. I think we do things like we play games, we play puzzles, even things like musical statues and musical bumps, and just simple things, just silly things really, so that we can have
that help you bond. I think the big takeaway from that, Dustin, for me is self-care, isn't it? The phrase we sometimes use is you can't offer from your cup if your cup is not full.
No.
And that's really important for mothers to understand, and fathers, I think, who can be impacted as well by perinatal health issues, is that actually the first point of call is looking after yourself, and then you are able to give and able to love. And I suppose if we can get that bit first, then we can do the rest. I don't know how much.
Ask it and then we can move on. It's really hard to accept my pregnancy and have a feeling that I am not going to be able to love or care a second child. Does it affect a baby's health in the womb, or how badly can it affect a baby's health?
For you to explain how it would affect, but before you do that, can I just suggest is if that's how you're feeling from now on, it's best to seek professional help from now on. Don't wait for the time where baby is here and then you go and seek the support. Start building up from the support. There's loads of support available, which is prenatal and antenatal. Get the support from now on, so then you are ready, and maybe whatever your feelings are, like you're worrying, will be a bit less, and you'll be able to manage and cope better after having the baby if you start seeking the support from now on.
Thank you
so yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Farah, for saying that. I think to the question, will it impact my baby in the womb? The challenging answer is yes. So the more stress that we feel, the baby can be impacted by that. So for example, the hormone cortisol, which is raised in stressful situations, can cross the placenta and can impact on our baby. I think the key time, actually, we think is probably around 6 months to 18 months. That's probably where the most significant, when the baby's born, the most significant time in terms of the impact on their development. But nonetheless, there is an impact during pregnancy. And so actually the biggest message really is get help. The problem is that you start to feel guilty that you're having an impact on your baby. But it's actually to say, I'm going to remove that guilt because this isn't my fault. This is just a consequence of a lot of chemicals and a lot of reactions going on in my brain. And what I need to do is get help right now. And that's the biggest thing that can impact for my baby's health. And remember that every day that you seek help and you improve your mental health is better development for your baby. So everything is an improvement. Everything is a stepwise. There is an impact on babies, but that's why it's so important to get help. And your family can help you too. You're not on your own. Your family can help you and your community can help you. There is an impact, but that when you seek help, we can only improve things.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have already run over time, so unfortunately, we're going to have to start winding down, but just know that after today's webinar, we continue to be here for you. We are here for you. Just today, we know we've gained invaluable information through all our experts, how they've shared their knowledge, the information, Tasneem's very, very powerful personal experience. And again, as again, Shamina has said, we are here for you. We've got the coronavirus support team line. We do also have the WAP Sisterhood Forum, which is a virtual community of women. You'll see on the screen when the next session is going to be. Please just register yourself. You'll be aware also of the Preparing for Parenthood, which I mentioned right at the beginning, and we have a part 2. Look out for details of that on Al Saha, or sign up now. And also we have Embrace, which is a one-to-one support for parents of newborns. Obviously all this is in full collaboration with our institutions, with the Health Board, with Social Welfare Board, with the Education Board. And if you're interested, just let us know. You can always use WAP as a conduit. We will then signpost you to the best place that we can find to support you. So we have our institutional supports through the Aga Khan Health Board, through the Social Welfare Board, and externally also there is the Samaritan's Crisis Support. There's a number and an email there. So just to confirm again, if you need to seek out support, there is support there. We are there for you. Use any one of these conduits and just take some of the information that's been shared with you today. It's been invaluable. We hope that you have really gained some insight into the maternal mental health awareness that we've been seeking to deliver to you today. But unfortunately, time really flies and we do have to wrap up now. Any questions that have been unanswered today, we will be answering in our post-event communications. So finally, before we say goodbye on this windy Sunday afternoon, the WAP team, the health board team, all our speakers wish you the very warmest wishes for calm, for strength, for peace going forward. Please, everybody, stay healthy, stay safe, take good care, and know that we are here to support you. Kuda Hafiz, until next time. Yali Madat.